My first ever proper podcast gets live, and I told you as of yesterday that we're going live, so you took it on your stride pretty well.
Yeah. Had to give it a go.
So I didn't even push the camera, so we're off to start. So when you talk, I got to do that.
All right. Okay. Well, that's easy. Like,
Yeah.
I can see you've got nimble fingers. So you.
Oh yeah, we're off. Something sus in the first 5 seconds. I like it. But to start any podcast, I always ask sort of what is it that you do? Because I put a bit of a blurb there.
Yeah.
Whether you can live up to expectation, we'll see.
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting one. Look, my career and background is in new business development. So really, when I look at it, and I look at my strengths and what I bring to the businesses I've worked with, that's been it. It's that opportunity to kind of understand new technology, new opportunities, how businesses are developing, what they need to consider, not only in the moment, but what's happening a couple of years out. So I have that much wider strategic positioning. That's been inherent in everything I do. So, I like to always look at the bigger picture. But yeah, that's where I've kind of cut my teeth on that. So it's been working with great businesses, and I've been fortunate to work with some of the best, but certainly here in New Zealand. So my background, working with Spark New Zealand specifically, had a bit of time with Fujitsu prior to that, but so getting back into IT when I came here, so it's around 20 years ago that I came into New Zealand myself from the UK. I've had a history of in the UK IT industry there as well. So working with a business which had grown exponentially, working with corporate businesses, education, government clients, that type of thing. So I've seen a lot of change, right? Certainly from IT perspective. When I came to New Zealand, had a bit of time out from that. And then when I got back into it, worked with Fujitsu initially, got back into kind of client management, that type of thing, and then worked for Spark. So the opportunities there are unparalleled. I mean, it is a business where you have access to some of the best clients who are really pioneering change, not only for their own businesses, but for foundational things that happen in New Zealand, which is very cool to be part of. But also the people, just the team are exceptional. And
we can tell you did sales there, mate. That's a good pitch you did there. You practiced a few times.
Yeah, well, you asked what I did. So.
And he's off, just like mobilized.
Yeah.
Well, I always find it interesting. That was my first attempt at talking while switching, showing our reactions as we talk.
Yeah, sure.
It is what drives a person. Some people don't talk too deep, so we won't go too deep. But in essence, the theory that I've used on the podcast many times is that the most purposeful life you can have is helping a version of yourself.
That's a really interesting perspective. Yeah, sure. I get it. I think that for me, it's when businesses are adopting change, and I think all businesses are and have to, especially in current times. Over the past, say, 6 years, it's been certainly very focused on that. Past 2, even more so. But yeah, it's just a case of looking at how you can have that impact, irrespective of what you're doing. It's really building those relationships, building that kind of that understanding between you and the individual or the team that you're engaged with, and then moving that forward. So that's what I've done in that corporate space. I think what I've learned there is certainly that there's different ways to work. I was a big fan of kind of where the digital side of things were going, digital sales, that is, and that's to say, there were clearly mechanisms. LinkedIn is my tool of choice, clearly. But that's not to say it's the only one. But I've been fortunate to be in businesses which have a selection. So I've kind of seen a lot of how things work. And I don't think I've seen anything like LinkedIn as a connected platform that actually allows you not only connection at a local level with your peers and with your direct customers, but also at an international level. So, your CRMs don't necessarily do that. If you're running a Salesforce and that's your tool of choice, you're not going to get connection to people who can help you internationally and forums that can do that. LinkedIn has that power, which is kind of unique in respect of how it can deliver it. How you actually observe that is the key, right? Not everybody sees it like that. Quite a lot of people still see it as the way to getting a new role or a new job, and it's largely to do with HR or repositioning yourself. It's grown up a bit since then, and that's a fair call.
Yeah, I think I always find that the most valuable, whether it's ad spend or pursuit, tends to be where there's a lot of people in that area,
Mm.
but very little advertisers or competitors. And that tends to come with new innovation. You
Mm.
know, when TikTok first came out,
Yeah.
I was all about that 2 years ago. And that's the thing. You got to be aware as a human that you're resistant to change,
Yeah.
and that if you can recognize that and explore those, platforms, then it can work quite well.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can dig a little deeper, because we don't meet too many specialists. I'm sort of just post an ungodly amount of content, hope something happens. So you know LinkedIn a little bit more.
Yeah.
So what are you sort of seeing change in the platform? Like, what are some things that a new feature that people might not be aware of, or
Yeah.
sort of how the platform's evolved over time?
Yeah. So before I just get to that, because I
Oh,
think
yeah, go on.
you've touched on an interesting point for me, which is about understanding yourself.
Mm,
I think that I think in many cases, how you actually understand yourself and what your real skills are and where you add real value. If you actually invest in that, you get a better perspective on how you can actually build a brand or a personal brand, in this space, in the digital space, more effectively. Because if you're constantly trying to think that's who I want to be, and that's how I outwardly perceive myself, and that might not be who you actually are. When you do
mm.
the work and you actually do something like Clifton Strengths or something of that nature,
Clifton
yeah.
Strengths.
So if you do the Gallup Strengths profiling or something of that nature, excuse me, it's just a case of that gives you some indication as to where you're at. Right. And I've gone through that process. It kind of started for me there, and it allowed me a level of confidence and understanding of myself personally that I could then go confidently into things and have different conversations. So yeah, when it comes to creating a digital self, you have to know yourself before you genuinely do that. I think there's massive
Mm.
advantage in that. Yeah.
It's a good point. Like,
I'll get to the other stuff though. We'll talk about
yeah, we'll deep dive into
we'll
LinkedIn.
definitely touch on LinkedIn's benefits and how that's grown up. But yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think I spoke to the other day about it. There's a lot of things you can sort of either see in salespeople, where, like, some of the best salesmen are the most impulsive buyers.
yeah.
And the other thing is, what a person charges is proportionate to their self-worth,
Hmm.
is something I find. So I agree with you in terms of understanding yourself
Yeah.
and then projecting that to the world. So before we get into the LinkedIn part, because I like talking about people,
Yeah.
what's a framework you use for self-awareness, or to actually discover who you are? Because what are you? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. So if I look, Clifton Strengths is a worldwide platform, right? So this is a kind of a very proven process that you go through to get an end result, which gives you over 4 domains. It will give you 36 strengths, and you'll have a top 5, a top 10, and then you can actually rank everything in order,
Hmm.
right? So what that gives you is a clarity that you perhaps wouldn't have had in any other space. So if I give you my top 5, for example, I've got strategic, right, which gives me that kind of wider picture, and that's definitely how I am as an individual. I like to look at what's going on and then see how we can affect things, and more importantly, bring the right people to the table when that's required, is because you might have different facets, especially in a company such as Spark, for example. There's so many different areas where you can add benefit and influence. But also then I move on to input, which is I like to consume. I live in the world of digital media, right? So for me, consuming large amounts of information every day is not a chore. It's actually something I really, really love.
Mm.
So from that perspective, I get deep knowledge and understanding, and I can be of use. And that sort of goes into my mind of how I can actually influence those strategic positionings. From there, I've got this really obsessive thing about individualization and personalizing things for people. So that detail that I'm getting, I then can bring to the appropriate people at any point in time. Now that may sound logical, but actually when you're doing it at scale, it's quite profound, in fact, of its impact, because I've got lots of customers how I communicate and how I choose to actually interact with my clients. I give specific detail to all of them in different ways. So it's very cool the way that I use the digital platforms for that advantage, right? In addition, I have Activator, as the next strength. This is my top 5. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
then a ranger. What those two things together mean is that I can actually bring together a collective team of people. So this is why I collaborate and I use other contract people to work with in respect of getting stuff done for my clients, because it allows me that professional connection, and it also allows me that scale to do different things when that's required. So that those activator means I do it, and the arranger means I can bring the people together. So when I look at that as the top 5 strengths, they're very complementary, but it also allows me to not enter into things where those strengths are just not my gig. I can actually be very calculated about how you work. And I think it allows you that opportunity of, when you know where your strengths lie, you can actually then work with people who are very good at those strengths, and vice versa. It works the other way. So they bring you in for those things. So where I've worked in agile teams and, those kind of collaborative squad environments, you definitely get that vibe, because you understand one another, you understand where you're going to add value, and then they come together as a group to solve a problem, and then the sprints take place, and then that thing happens, right? So those are really powerful ways of working. And I think get that right, and then you can do LinkedIn as a strategy very, very clearly. Often that's the bit that people miss, is that opportunity to understand yourself first, and then know where you're going to be of benefit to your clients and to the team.
Well, it's smart. Like if you're able to facilitate a network very consistently and efficiently, it's going to be quite powerful. As if you're just an operator and that's what you enjoy, and you don't want to grow a massive team, but you want a massive network that can deliver.
Yeah. Well, I think quite frankly, that wouldn't have been the norm in every business. And I'm not saying that people who have teams are wrong. It obviously works for them in the strategy that they have, and I'm completely down with that, because quite frankly, that means more leverage for me when I work with those people. So that's beneficial, right? But the thing about it here is, for how I run things at the moment, doesn't necessarily lend itself for me to have those individuals directly reporting to me and being part of that. I want that more flexibility than that. In the way I function, myself and my wife, who has a photography business, for example, we work very well together, and we collaborate very well together with other people. So we get results as a result of that. So when we're in together, it's quite a formidable conversation, because the scope that we both have, not only for our professional careers, is also what we do now and how we translate that, works real well. So, those are things to take advantage of,
Yeah. I mean, I think about this is a poor example.
I doubt it.
But
I doubt it.
I think about going to use Fiverr or something, and so that's a medium to connect with a certain contractor, but then I'm not contributing to their ability to work well with me. Like it's a transactional encounter.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate these contractors that obviously have some recurring work with you, but have a different approach, and you're not actually influencing their ability or helping them train and develop? Like, how do you balance that?
Well, I think like those platforms were set up, and they functionally work for certain work. They're really good. Editing might be an example of photography and or video work. What's termed as kind of menial work, and I'm not to underestimate what that is, but things that if you spend time on it, it's going to occupy too much time, so where you could be more beneficial elsewhere, right? So where your strengths aren't, maybe you lean into that. The challenge there is building a relationship with those people that you can actually trust, because I do know of examples where people have been down that track and have kind of just been left high and dry. The initial promise is very, very good, but ultimately the delivery is pretty poor. So you got to just be careful about that. I think you got it's a bit of a hit and miss, unfortunately. I think there's no security around that, because I don't know how I can't say I've used Fiverr in any kind of regular sense, because I tend to go to local people. There's more than enough people in the game. LinkedIn's a great platform for connecting you to people who are brilliant advocates of what they do and how they work. So you just connect with those people, and be it that they're local or maybe they're in different parts of the country, it works, right? So you can start to build up a much better cadence of and relationship, and then they just become people you can rely on, and that's cool.
Well, I didn't realize that until recently. So I was B2C for obviously being a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And there's no one there to copy. So I was just sort of winging it, because, normally they'd get you clients through intermediaries. And I was like young, and why would the accountant give me business? I was like, why don't I go social? Because they're not there.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is, like, I was inviting people on podcast guests and building relationships with these really talented people.
Yes.
And I wasn't thinking about the benefit or anything like that, and was just having them on. And there's a reciprocation bias where they appreciate that. And then I had these problems when I started the business that were just getting solved
Mhm.
over and over and over. Where I know someone. What? How do I solve this? Bring. And a commercial lawyer is telling me, oh, you got to do this. I'm like, so
Yeah.
LinkedIn. What are some ways it should be used, but you don't see it used enough?
Okay, so let's just get into that a little bit of technical stuff about what's happened over the past couple of years, right, in respect to the platform itself. Because I think, as you know, there's been lots of shifts in workplace, how workplaces function. Obviously, we're now very much hybrid in respect of how people are online and how they're working and that type of thing. So I think, you know, prior to COVID, you had this environment where there was, if you were talking to people on video conference calls, or sending them video messages or audio messages and that type of thing, or you were leaving them videos in a social platform, that was seen to be quite a radical approach. You know, like that was seen to be quite cutting edge. And seriously, those are the things where people were questioning. Certainly, some of the stuff I did, people were going, you know, you're crazy, man. What are you doing? But it was so obviously when COVID happened, we were all locked up in at home. All of a sudden, those opportunities to meet clients face to face fell away, and quite rightly, businesses focused internally. They helped people with the stresses and the challenges that then placed on the business, and also how they interacted with their customers. So they had to relearn a lot of stuff, and managers had to think differently, and teams had to think differently and operate differently. So, you know, you've got that. So LinkedIn has evolved as a result, and I think that, you know, to Microsoft's credit, as the people who actually are behind the whole thing. So yeah, they own LinkedIn, right? So they, you know, it's a case of they've gone right. How do we incorporate our technology into that? So over COVID, we saw the growth of audio based social platforms, for example, the likes of you know, you had Clubhouse. That was huge, and how that came to market was really clever, and it was kind of exclusive, and people were getting onto it, but it was the opportunity to then engage verbally with people, and LinkedIn didn't have that. It had this kind of, I'm connected to you, but I wasn't really talking with you. All of a sudden, Clubhouse said, yeah, we can do this connection, and that's where, quite frankly, it was a great opportunity to sit for hours and chat with people in wide forums. Now, you know, a group of us here ran rooms. Glenn Marvin was part of that, and a few others that Mamita and a few others that are part of this kind of LinkedIn crew that are really avid users of the platform and understand the platform. So, you know, they're great people. But we built up this kind of understanding, and we worked every day diligently talking about LinkedIn and various other subjects to get people on board. So it was a great place to meet people and connect and widen your network, right? LinkedIn has subsequently now taken on audio rooms, right? So it's got its own audio based platform. So, you know, they took the best of kind of Clubhouse and said, how do we bring that into our space? The advantage is immediately this audience and the people who are listening today will be connecting, if they're watching on these platforms, will be able to just connect in and see that, you know. So it's via the video platform, I think it's the same kind of idea. So if you see people there, you can immediately connect, and that is hugely powerful, because what you're trying to get is a community. The word of this year has certainly been community for me, in respect of building that out rather than just simply having random networks. Is trying to build connection with people that have a genuine following of what you're doing, and will respect that, and then bring proactive opportunity, be it for them or from other people, because they respect what you do. So that's the trick, is kind of trying to build that out, rather than being random about it. Create demand, not leads. Those kind of things. I think there's a huge mindset shift in that, because to create demand, you've got to actually invest in your platform to be more advantageous. So LinkedIn's grown up, it's definitely turned more towards creation. You talked about TikTok, you know, I think that's been a heavy influence, quite frankly, of bringing a different audience to LinkedIn. LinkedIn had a bit of a stigma about it being this kind of stuffy, professional based environment, when quite frankly, it's one of the most supportive and least trolled environments. The reason being
Yeah,
is that,
why?
well,
People pleasing corporate?
yeah,
That's what I think. What do you think?
There's a bit that I would say there's a bit of that, right? But
Mm.
quite frankly, people have invested a long time in building a professional brand and or professional standing. What they don't want to do is burn that overnight. You know, it's
Yeah.
not like a Twitter handle that you can just reestablish and then go for gold and do something else. You know, it's not the same thing. So I think that there's far more invested in it. It's the longest standing social platform. It's the most trusted platform. So from those perspectives, it's quite interesting. So I think, you know, that's why it shows up as a number one search. And then when people are looking at what you do prior to a meeting or after a meeting, it's the value proposition that you bring to the table as a result. So I'm big on those things. I spoke to you about that the other day, and it's like that's formula for me. You know, those are the things that make the difference. And do that right, and you get massive results. I mean, genuinely, like I've helped people in all walks of doing different things, not only just business. It's, you know, personal achievements and various other things they want to do via this channel. It's a game changer, and most people who are in this space would definitely agree with that. So yeah.
It's valuable. Like you see the extremes, and just a shout out to LinkedIn. Darren says great discussion, guys. Thank you, Darren.
Porter.
Huh?
Darren Porter.
Darren. I don't know how to say his last name. Sig. I know his face because Darren comments a lot in the post. He's very
fair enough. Well,
supportive
thank
man.
you, Darren. I appreciate the
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Yeah, I think the extremes in LinkedIn is you either have someone that's just giving all the time, and then people that are asking all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, let's get tactical a little bit. Let's get right at the secret sauce, because there's no such thing as IP. There's just such thing as being known as the person that gave it away.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, and also where that source came from, right? Because I think that, you know, we go back to, there's a lot of key influencers in this space who've been doing this for a lot longer than anybody than me even. You know, this is where I picked this stuff up from. So, you know, there's shout outs to a lot of people that I can tell you I followed in the early stages, and I'm sure there've been influencers for others.
Go on, so, shout out your top three.
Well, so the likes of Gary V. Gary V's, you know, like he you know, like he's almost like the grandfather of the whole thing. He's the architect, right? You know, you think about his strategy and how it works. But, you know, Cohen Ray was a big one for me. He's from out of Australia. Fantastic. And, you know, if you see that guy, I've seen him speak on a number of occasions. Very, very articulate guy, very clear, but also very purposeful in a consistent message of how he does it, and consistently across all platforms as a result. Brilliant social strategist. Who else have we got out there? I mean, you know, like Grant Cardone, for example. You know, that's, you know, he's not for everyone, but he's like, if you look at what he does, not what he says, it's actually quite an interesting way of actually being. So yeah, there's literally hundreds of people who could. I mean, look, out of the UK, Daniel Disney would be a fantastic example. Leah Turner's doing some incredible stuff. Look, you know, I don't know where to stop.
You
really.
did well. Yeah. Okay, let's get tactical on LinkedIn, because, you know, we don't get the opportunities to have demand creators. You're the first demand creator.
Demand creator. Okay, go.
So, like, okay, so you understand yourself. You got this image out there. You're making content. You're aligned with that image.
Yep.
Now what? Like, what should you think about? Profile. What should you be mindful of when you're presenting your profile? You know, do they have the audio? Do you have the video cover thing when you click on it? Like, what do you do?
Look, so the concept here is that you've got a structured platform which has binary components to it, which you have to populate, right? The fact is that LinkedIn has grown over time, so it's allowing you this opportunity to bring your true self to the space, which is kind of where most businesses and corporates have evolved to, right? They've got this opportunity to retain amazing staff because they actually support and are massive advocates for who they are, not what they do, kind of. You know, they want to support the person rather than the role necessarily. The people will always deliver on that. So yeah, you've got to populate the structure. So I'm a big fan of completing everything on there. I mean, you know, you shouldn't leave any stone unturned in respect of that. But then fundamentally, you can't just leave it alone. It's got to be something that is constantly evolving over time, and you've got to understand that the you know, little, you know, turning on creative mode gives you advantage. For example, you know, using the connection for your, you know, for to your for your website, there's a immediate click on the top of that. That's not just to stay stagnant. You don't just populate that once with your website and then leave it like that. It can be an active space to actually generate opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And when it works in tandem with other things such as your banner and those kind of things, which is exactly what I've done with other customers and only this week. So it generates just a different stimulus with the people who are connecting to it, because you can't, you got to understand that there's a much wider audience than simply your network, right? It's not only that the views bounce on, so you have to be mindful that you're not connected to everybody who will see this stuff, and you never know who's going to respond and how it's going to actually impact and who's going to influence. So using it in a strategic way to its best advantage is what's key. I know it sounds it's amazing to me because I've talked the story all the time, but those that don't know it, you kind of, there's a massive opportunity sitting there. And if you're wondering now, faced with the changes that are happening economically and those things that, what's the next year going to look like, invest in this stuff, because this will start to differentiate you in this market and show what your capability is. One thing I will say, right, that so COVID was really good for this in respect of, like I said, businesses returned back to who they were and kind of looked at their team, how they would support their team, understanding the different skill sets that team brings to the table. So, Jim in finance might be amazing at what he does and managing the payroll or whatever else it is that guy's responsible for, right? Let's just say that. At the weekend, he might be an incredible videographer. He might be doing DJ work. Like, what is it that he can bring to the table in a completely different sense? Like, these are the things, these hidden parts of people's capability is often overlooked. And it's not to say you necessarily need to move that guy from there to there, but if it might buzz him to change things up and allow him to run a session to show people how to do things differently. Because I don't think marketing and sales always have all the answers to generate those outcomes,
Yeah, I think, it's the most expensive and most valuable resource is your staff.
Yeah.
And it's underutilized. So a lot of the people I see in businesses are hiding their staff.
Yeah.
Or trying to control their staff. But just a real-time example of how valuable LinkedIn is. So, like, obviously new business, don't have much money for staff, but don't want to do video editing anymore. So I want to hire someone to do it.
Yeah.
So I went on Fiverr and I looked for which countries have the most amount of video editors. So it's India and Pakistan.
Yep.
Then I went on Sales Navigator, which is a LinkedIn thing, know, but maybe they don't. And look for people that had posted content in the last 30 days that were from India or Pakistan.
Yeah.
Interacted with that content, talked some shit, said, "Oh, I really like it," and only commenting genuine comments. Connected with them, and then had one Zoom chat. Did the interview. They started working the next day, and they've been up at like 3 or 4 trying to hustle because they love it and have the opportunity to do it. But LinkedIn, I think that's something that's really underutilized. Like nearly anything you want, provided that there's a person that can help facilitate that.
Yeah.
And they have a LinkedIn account. It's life changing.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Of course. Let's just talk about the stats, though, right? Let's just give it some kind of scope on this, because I like to look at that stuff every couple of months just to see where things are trending. And quite frankly, it's just interesting for me to see the growth that's still happening in LinkedIn. You think it might be saturated, especially in a country of this size. But I'm seeing changes in the market, right? So what we've got is this, if I just, off the top of my head from a month or so ago, we've got, a lot of the younger, so it's 18 plus, 18 to 24s are coming back to the space. And I genuinely feel that's a TikTok influence of people that they're encountering in that space. So they start talking about the platform and what its potential is and how that work for them. So they bring in their opportunities there, because you've got a lot of young hustlers who are doing amazing things in that space. And then you've got this massive swathe of 1.2 million in New Zealand who are in that kind of 24 to 34 age group, which is your millennial kind of leaders. And these are the people who are making structural and decisions around what's happening inside most businesses in today's market. And then you've got the older age groups as they start to play out, but even they're growing. So there's, the business owners, the established business owners and the leaders in businesses are coming back to the platform and using it in a much more creative way, starting to actually be more vocal about what they do and how they work. And I find that fascinating. Even the older age group is slightly seeing a bounce on, right? So like there's trending all over the place. This middle swathe stays pretty stagnant because there's just the higher volume. But quite frankly, these other two, when they're growing at 10,000 per month, I think that's significant in New Zealand because we've not a big ecosystem here, and 48% of the market plus it's nearly 49% is connected on LinkedIn. So that shows you how powerful it is. You look globally, you're getting into that kind of 850 900 million people connected on the platform. Now, not a lot are posting. There's about, there's less than 5% which post on a regular basis. But so that means your reach, the reach is there.
Yeah.
So where, Gary Vee talks about this undervalued reach and potential all the time, and it still exists. Even from a couple of years back when he was here in New Zealand talking about that stuff. It's kind of you get this the reality is still there. So I think that miss it at your peril because I think the opportunities there. I think especially with how things are shaping up economically, there's opportunity to be different in the market and showcase how you do stuff and connect with people outside of the network. Internationally, start bringing those thought leaders to your space, showing of your clients how much that means to them and how it can change their game, because often that's where the gold lies. So be brave on that.
Yeah, I never thought to go overseas. It makes sense. Yeah, there's a few lessons in there, like even new features on old platforms provide opportunity, like Facebook Reels.
Yeah,
is actually better than TikTok now.
Yeah, totally. Look, any short form format I think is definitely killer material, right? I mean, for me, the biggest thing that LinkedIn mistake they've made was take away the stories that they had. For me, stories was a phenomenal way of converting people. It built an audience super quick, and you could see exactly who was engaging with it. So you only had to run maybe a couple of weeks of stories before you got a real consistency of who the clients were, and you could just proactively connect with them and say, "Hey, I'm so happy you're following my stories. This is what's going on." But they've taken that feature away for other things they've brought to the platform since. So I guess there's only so much structural room they've got to work with the platform, as I understand it. I mean, I'm no developer, but
well, me either.
You have to kind of take that as it is. But it is, for me, that was a mistake. It was certainly taking. I was using it, 3 a day. Really concise messaging. It was fantastic. So I think short form video is now taken over from that. So
it was money for. Well, I had all the infrastructure already for it, so it was awesome because I could just upload the 4 videos a day I was making from TikTok. You put it in there. Okay, so let's say you've got the nice profile.
Yeah.
You're putting content out. You're using the new features. You go in these audio rooms. Are the audio rooms decent?
Yeah, I think that I think the opportunity is there to grow it, right? It's up to you really to make a mark, in the same way that any podcast has legs and has to have that consistency. You're here at 300 plus podcasts, right? So you're for as much effort as you've invested in that gives you some kind of authority now, because 27 you told me was it 17? I don't know.
27. Only 1% of people make it to the 27th episode.
So there you go. So I mean, you're smashing that. So from that perspective, that consistency is everything, right? And it's not to give up on it. The power actually is in the team, is in your team doing it as a consistent thing. And it's not necessarily that everyone has to hammer it every single day and spend their life in LinkedIn. It's just a case of not just sharing a company blog and hoping that the business page is going to live for you and make it all happen, because that isn't the case. That's invariably the least followers around the company thing, despite the fact that companies' pages have had a lot of investment, a lot of new analytics and various other things coming through on that. But also, so it's valuable to do it, but temper it with the people that actually people engage with, because those are the stars of the show, and not to miss out on the potential of your CFO and what he can add to the table, because it's not always just about the sales team either. You need to have all the cards represented so that you can lay them out on the table when you need them, full deck.
Yeah, well, you appeal to different markets. Okay, so I just it's rare to get someone that just double downs on a platform and actually can sell off it.
Yeah,
because you get the extremes. So you post this content, you're thoughtful to represent who you are.
Yeah,
and then people view it and you interact with them. Do you do comment outreach? Like, what's your whole sales process?
Well, so
you can use me as an example.
Yeah. So I mean, let's say this is to give you the full sales process might be a bit crazy for me to do that.
Oh yeah, oh, you keeping it close to home.
No, it's not that there's any secrets here, but
there's secrets then.
There's some things that like there might be some things that might be more relevant. At the end of the day, there's a general concept here that interaction with your clients is important, right? In the same way that if you're at a networking event and your client was standing there and nobody was talking to them, you would go over and actually have an active conversation because it will be in your interest to do that, right?
Natural selection.
Yeah, just
leave them alone. They gotta work out themselves.
You're just gonna leave them out in the cold, right? Oh gosh, that's hard.
I only help winners. No. Yeah.
So the moment I'm talking about here is just one of those things where that's what I'm talking about. Is like what you want is that interaction. You want to be in the comments. You certainly want to be interacting. The clarity you got to understand. LinkedIn's a search engine which has access to the direct every person who's in your line of work or your ideal client profile is existing in that space. So quite frankly, you can search and find those individuals as and when you need to. The challenge is how you go about doing that. It's not spamming them. It's not hitting them up. It's actually diligently understanding who the most influential people are, taking the time to see the profiles and the stuff they're putting out, and then interacting with that accordingly, because that pays dividends. I mean, quite frankly, if anyone's invested in the platform and they see commentary from somebody who's sensible and starts to say really good things about what they're posting and how they're working, adding value, not only to that, to prompt other conversations. What you want is for their posts to be popular so that they start seeing value back from that. Like they're posting for a reason. It's not just for, if it is just sharing the company blog, then that may not be as interesting. But at the end of the day, if they're actually making a concerted effort to do things differently, then interacting with that will pay dividends. And what you get to a point is where the proactivity happens. What you want is this proactivity of adding so much value and sharing so much of what you do. And not only the business part of you personally, show who you are in the same way that this is not radically different from when you're meeting people face to face and you're talking down the pub, because there's going to be some kind of shares of like the kind of movies you're into or the sport you do or whatever else it may be that buzzes you in that conversation. But the point here is that you have that little bit of share. We talked about, I did a video previously and it was about Star Wars, and you go, well, I would have remembered that if I'd have seen it, so, those things are, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and then that's always going to come out. It's coming out now, so I can't hold that back. It's one of those things. But it's those are the moments where if you share a bit of that, people go, oh, I like that's a bit of me. You know.
Well, there's in ClickFunnels they talk about the idea of an attractive character.
Yeah,
an attractive character is someone that's polarizing, because people will often try and get liked instead of loved. Yeah, because they're not actually standing for something.
Yeah. Well, it's also you got that risk of kind of isolating yourself, right, and being someone that's too out there, and you don't want to touch them. But in the same vein, they're admired from a distance, right, and there people will still gravitate towards it. I think look. Gary V, let's go back to that. He was like, swearing, bringing just a completely different vernacular to the table. But having said that, I've seen a lot of people locally who are doing just the same thing, who are swearing and are just bringing a completely different mindset to it and winning at the same time. I think there's scope here to say that if you're appealing to the market you want to appeal to, and they like what you're doing, then you're going to have a good opportunity present from that. Those that don't like it, it doesn't matter, because they're never going to like you ever. You kind of got to be confident about who you are. So I think that if you're trying to be everything to everybody, that's the challenge. LinkedIn isn't for that, and I think that, if anything, that's probably where it came from previously, is that everybody tried to be everything vanilla to everybody and then hope to hell some of it would stick. Whereas now you can be laser focused. If I want to sell to 3 people, I pretty much will say I can do that by getting the right, knowing who it is, what we got to do and how we got to do it. And I'll get their contact and I will get their attention via that channel. Simple as that.
Well, I'll put my strategy on the table just so people maybe you want to have yours.
Man, let's go on the strategy. Let's go.
So here's what I'm gonna do to grow this new business.
Yeah,
is so it's 30 cold calls, which but none of them are cold, because I'm only targeting people that have LinkedIn's.
Yeah.
So I'm cold calling them, talking about their LinkedIn. Oh, hey Bob, we've got 50 mutuals on LinkedIn. I've never talked to you before. I really like that article that you just did recently. Is now a bad time? And I try and get them to say no as soon as possible because that's from Never Split the Difference.
Right. Yeah.
So you put them at ease, and then you get them to commit that they can't use that as an objection, use that stuff. But anyway, so do those 31s, invite them on a podcast. So I'm giving them value.
Yeah.
Not this isn't for you to long-winded pitch. Now the next thing is 50 comments a day. This is the Gary V $1.80 strategy on existing network, which is I find LinkedIn, the performance isn't really the content as much as it is that the people want to interact with you.
Yeah.
They'll just comment on it. I've seen some awful content, no subtitles, just recording a video, and they just love it because they love the person.
Yeah.
And then 50 commenting on the CEOs of medium-sized professional service companies and interacting with them. And then doing a connection request that's unique and talking a bit of shit, which will screen out some. I've upset the odd person.
Yeah.
And then now, thanks to you, I'm going to do a video message.
Exactly.
So what am I missing? What should we do? What yeah. I'm trying to leech value,
I
for
think
the audience.
Let's be clear. Each individual business has its own approach of what it wants to actually achieve. I
Yeah.
mean, from your perspective, what you're trying to do to get to those people, I wholeheartedly support that approach because there's nothing there that really screams to me that it's off the mark. What you want to do is actually show interest, and I would comment on their stuff online first of all. Like actually build some kind of understanding. So when that call comes in, they genuinely know who you are because they've seen you having that dialogue. So that needs to be perhaps a little bit more established than just simply going, "I've got 50 connections." He'll go, "So what?" That doesn't mean anything to me. That's still not relevant. So I think if you build an understanding and then bring people back, and then you can say, or share. See, this is the beauty of this environment, right? Is that what you're actually effectively creating is a back catalog of content that people can refer to. So it's kind of like having your own library of content. We're surrounded by artwork, which is insane. But like talk about back libraries, it'd be great to just flick through that. It's exactly what it is, right? So that ability to share it as a direct kind of copy link to post, and then just go, hey, you're talking about this subject. I posted a month ago on that, and this is some real cool stats. So those things bring your kind of like your narrative to life inside that person's mind, rather than it just being in the moment. It's not just a standard comment. So I think that's probably a trick for players right there, is to use it as a way of actually engaging, and DM channel is the way to do that. You can have a comment and then a DM to say, look, I've commented in your post because I really like what you're talking about, but hey man, there's a couple of things here that are really poignant to what I feel that could move the dial a little bit more. And that could be a share from somebody else's post. That doesn't have to be your content, right? That could be just something that's highly relevant. There are a lot of people out in the market who do some amazing analytical work in the LinkedIn space that I'm privileged to be connected to, and I use their information with their approval to say, dude, if I want, can I share this to other people? And they're typically, by all means. Obviously it's public domain, but appreciate the ask. So those kind of things, actually that builds a bit more kind of mana with those people, and also it allows you then that ability to share stuff readily. And there's some, like I say, some amazing creators who really put a lot of effort into their stuff, and I want to herald those people. I'm not going to claim that work as my own. I want to showcase them and say, this is how you do things. I mean, the content that I supply with my clients is littered with opportunities to connect with other people and follow them as a result, because they're in the same lane as me, but they haven't got my experience. Like, no, we're all individuals, right? We've all got a lens that we've come through life with, and maybe that's changed over time, because we've been able to see different things and how that's worked and worked with different people and all of our experiences. So how that brings that together is unique to you. So don't worry about other people. It's better to work with other people and collaborate. You grow like that.
Well, you said something interesting, because I believe information should be free, and what people pay for is personalization and curation. So you made an interesting point around, you've recognized either a problem they've vocalized or you got a sense of with their profile, and then provided a solution that also shows social proof in terms of what you've done. Quite smart.
Well, the thing here is that it's where you've got, I think it's what amazing to me, the amount of leaders in New Zealand who don't have any kind of social presence at all. I think I understand it from the perspective of the perhaps they don't want to have that profile. They feel that they're going to be hit up all the time with people asking for jobs or whatever else it may be, that can get a bit fatiguing. So, but the fact is there's still value to add. They don't necessarily have to respond to that stuff. And quite frankly, they could put a post out to say, this isn't a channel for that. If you want to talk to my HR people, we've got a very structured way of doing this stuff, and be vocal about that. So you don't get that. And then every time somebody says, can I have a job? He's just kindly drop them that DM and say, hey, we've got a structured process for doing this, and then you just nip that in the bud every time. It's a much more professional way of doing it, like you just take the time to create the content. But the thing is, the value you add back to the business as a result, and how then individuals can lean into that and share information is hugely powerful. It just is.
Yeah.
It's huge. If as a salesperson coming from that angle, if I have that in my arsenal to be able to then in a conversation say, my CEO has said this, and I think that would be hugely valuable. And, larger organizations have a multitude of angles in which you can share information, but there's nothing quite like having that individual commenting about what they do. Microsoft do a really good job of this, clearly, because it's just part and parcel of the process. But when you see commentary from their CEO, for example, Vanessa Sorensen here in New Zealand, comments regularly, and it's not always the company. You can clearly see when it's her posting. So, from that perspective, you get a sense of who she is, how proud she is in respect to the work she does, and also the company narrative is there as well. So that's a great example of how you do that from a senior level.
Yeah, well, you think I don't know of any business that's successful that didn't have a personal brand or mascot.
Yeah.
Like who cares about your logo? To be honest.
Well, the thing is, look, let's go right to the top. Apple, Tim Cook would have more followers than Apple, I'd wager. Like and that's the respect. Richard Branson certainly would have more than Virgin. So like that's the reality. It's those individuals. There's the top of the tree, the visionaries, right? Those are the people that you kind of draw from. Simon Sinek's business you wouldn't know Simon Sinek's business. It's Simon Sinek you follow, right? So that's what it's about. So people want that connection. They want to feel that they're able to at Simon Sinek, and that he might see it or comment on it. Those are the connections that people want. Gary V is actually an expert commentator in that respect. I know he's got teams working for him, but he invariably does that. Hell, he was the first person to put a text message out, text me, on his profile, right? So just insane. So,
well, speaking of connections, believe it or not, we've spoken for 45 minutes, or 46 and 39 seconds.
There you go. Wow.
So how and why should they connect with you?
How LinkedIn is the preferred method for all the time. Obviously, I do have a website, but all that stuff's connected by that channel. So agency8.co.nz is my website, but that'll just bring you to me. If you want to speak to me, you can schedule a time there. That'd be awesome. I'm open to any conversations there. But yeah, why should they do it? I think if you're now considering what 2023 is going to look like for you and your sales team. If you've got some challenges that you think, how can we elevate? How can we connect with our clients? How can we retain good staff? How can we do good things to engage our people and our process to our clients? That's I can bring that to life, and that's and it's not a LinkedIn session. LinkedIn's the vehicle. It's a sales conversation that really fundamentally is strategic in its approach, and LinkedIn's the vehicle we use for that.
Yeah, wow. All right. Well, yeah, I was thinking while you're talking, imagine, if let's say I did 2 weeks of just commenting and building that rapport and having that understanding to build the people that I'm going to communicate with. That makes complete sense. All right. Well, if you want to reach out to him,
please do.
Stuart, please do. And thanks for everyone that listened. I know the live doesn't get much, but the podcast guests the podcast listeners will be all about this. So I think it worked.
Yeah, well, that's it. The proof's in the pudding, right? Let's see.
We'll see. We'll find out.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's been cool though.